In this video, I'm going to be using Elmer's wood filler to fill in all the gaps and holes in my pallet wood desk. Then I'm going to be sanding it down to make it nice and smooth. It looks like I forgot to turn my phone off. Alright, let me turn this thing off real quick. So one quick tip for your Elmer's wood filler, if it starts to dry out, you can just pour a little bit of water in it and then mix it up with your putty knife and then you'll be good to go. It'll be as good as new. I really like to put a lot of wood fill in the knots, and I like to put a lot of wood fill in the gaps in between the slats. This will really give your desk some character and really make it smooth when you're done. This may seem like a lot of work. It's really going to come out beautiful if you do this. Now I got a text. There's always something. Alright, let's see who it is.
What's up?
What's up?
I am just chillin' working in my shop.
Cool watch maken.
I am making a beautiful pallet wood desk.
Wow, that sounds cool, but why pallet wood?
Well, for one thing it's free, plus all the imperfections in the pallet wood will give the desk a ton of character.
Oh man, can't wait to see it.
I am also making a YouTube video about it.
Lol, you and your YouTube videos.
Yeah, I know, but I am trying to make my videos better. This time I am going to use a list to organize my video.
Okay, that's actually a good idea. What's on your list?
I was just getting ready to rehearse. Do you want to hear it? I meant rehearse. Smiley face emoji.
Lol, let's hear it, what you got.
Alright, here it goes. 5 sanding tips for pallet wood projects. Most people like to give a bonus tip at the end, but this bonus tip's so important I'm going to give it to you right off the bat. As a matter of fact, I showed it to you in the very first part of the video. If you want your pallet wood project to come out nice and smooth, you'll need to fill all the holes and gaps with wood fill. I like to use Elmer's wood filler. Alright, now that we got the bonus tip out of the way, let's get into the list. Number 1. A lot of sanding will be required in the beginning. I like to use a belt sander. You have to be careful with a belt sander because it'll take off a lot of material really quick. So the first rule of sanding with a belt sander is to always sand with the grain. You're probably wondering what I'm doing here, sanding against the grain, but with every great rule there's always a caveat. So the exception to rule number 1 is when you are working with pallet wood, you can break rule number 1. The reason you don't sand against the grain is because you'll put sanding scratches and gouges on your project. But with a pallet wood project, all those imperfections are going to give your project a ton of character. The holy grail for a great pallet wood project is to make it nice and smooth, but making it look like it's still an old piece of wood. Alright, now on to tip number 2. Now that we know the rules, we can finally get started. First thing we need to do is pick out our sandpaper. In the beginning, we want to take off a lot of material, so we're going to use a really coarse sandpaper like 50 grit or an 80 grit. The smaller the number, the coarser the sandpaper. Softwood sands a lot quicker than hardwood, so the first thing you want to do is test out your wood. I'd start with the 80 grit and see how much wood it takes off. If it's not taken off enough, then you're going to want to go ahead and switch to the 50 grit. This step of the sanding process can take a really long time. There's no reason to make it take any more by using too light of a grit. So if you have to use 50 grit, you switch it down and start sanding. These pallet wood slats are a 1/2 inch thick, so we got lots of room to make mistakes. For safety tips here, I like to use safety glasses and a dust mask. Another tip here is don't round the edges. With the belt sander, it'll take off way too much material. Save this for a later step with lighter grit sandpaper. Alright, tip number 3. Next, you want to use a medium grit sandpaper. I like to use 120 grit. For this part of the sanding process, I like to switch to a different sander that's a little more forgiving. I like to use a DeWalt Random Orbit Palm Sander. After all that sanding with the belt sander, it's really nice to switch to a different tool that's a little more comfortable to use. The only problem with the random orbit sander is it requires special sandpaper. You have to get the hook and loop sanding discs. But the cool thing is, you just stick them on the bottom like this. You just line up the holes. They're easy to put on and they're easy to take off. Tip number 4. After you're done sanding your project with a 120 grit sandpaper, you want to inspect your project for any gaps or holes that need to be filled. Fill all your gaps and holes with some wood fill and a putty knife. Let it dry and then resand it with a 120 grit sandpaper. At this point, a lot of people give up. So tip number 5 is don't quit. It's time to get out the 220 grit sandpaper. This is where you're going to get the nice smooth finish. It may feel like a lot of work to resand this whole project with a 220 grit, but it'll be worth it in the end. In my next project, I'm going to be using sanding sealer to pre-treat the wood before I stain it. Sanding sealer does a great job of conditioning the wood and preparing it for stain, but it does require you to resand the whole thing one more time with 220 grit. This may seem like a lot more work. The sanding sealer will raise the grain of the wood, and when you sand it down with the 220 grit, you're not going to believe how amazing your pallet wood project is going to come out in the end. This just looks amazing. Look at that. Then I'm going to be getting out a gray stain to make this beautiful pallet wood project look like old pallet wood again. My name is Jason, and the name of my YouTube channel is called That Hobby. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss my next video about using the sanding sealer and the gray wood stain. If you like pallet wood projects, you can check out this pallet wood projects playlist right here.
And don't forget to tell Jason how much you all like Robo voices in the comments. Thank you beautiful people for watching our YouTube video.